So I've had so many ups and downs lately, and that has been hard on me. Depression spirals that last 2 or 3 days at a time. I'll come out of it, and then I'm good for 2 or 3 days, maybe a little longer. I go back into another one. That's been going on with me a lot lately, and it has not been easy. I try to see my therapist more. I spoke of the therapist I see now, Winnie, that I guess I've seen for a few months, and that was going pretty well. I thought it was going all right. She was wanting to continue to work that I had done with my psychologist for a year. That was my psychologist I had for that time was very supportive, and I really feel like had me on a pretty strong path, probably had me on a path to transition, but just had my life kind of on a more, I would say, positive trajectory where I seem to be more stable more often. And that's not been the case here lately. I'm not going to say I've regressed back to a couple of years ago or year and a half ago when I started, over a year and a half ago when I started therapy. I haven't regressed like that, but I've still had some really rough days. And what happens is I'll ruminate on unaliving, and I'll go back to saying, man, this isn't worth it. I'll start thinking about this just really isn't worth doing anymore. So what I was doing was picking up earlier appointments with my therapist, Winnie. I used to do this with Sabine too, the psychologist. Where I go, you can call in, and if there's a canceled appointment, you can pick it up. They'll put you on a text list, and if something comes open, it automatically lets you know. You can say yes or no to accept it, or type it in yes or no to accept it. Never had a problem with that. And I noticed the last time I've been scheduled out 3 weeks at a time with Winnie. She'll say, I'm going to schedule you out 2 weeks, but I go up to the counter and they say, well, she don't have nothing for 3 weeks. So what happens, I get on the text list. I've been able to pick up an appointment week to week in the last couple of weeks. Well, the last week she seemed really weird about it, and she didn't say much except, well, I just saw you last week, but then we went on with the session. And I told her I've been having rough times. I picked up a cancellation. She's just like, okay. I did it again this week. I was scheduled out 3 weeks. Well, I'd seen her a week ago, and I was able to get an earlier appointment. So it was just a week. I went through another depression spiral, and I was ruminating on unaliving, and I was in a really dark place. This last depression spiral is one of the darkest I've had in a while. So I go in there, and first of all, she's late coming to get me. It's a 4:00 appointment. I'm probably the last appointment. And when I picked up the cancellation, it was within a couple of days of this appointment. But she's late to come get me. She comes and gets me. She's, again, like, she seems kind of annoyed or irritated. And when we get in the office, she says, well, I just saw you last week, like she did before. But then she says, well, my boss is saying that we don't have the resources for this. We can't see you like this. We can't see anybody. I said, well, what are you talking about? You're already here. I picked up a canceled appointment. I've done that on many occasions. I said, they let me do it. They tell me I can do it, that it's fine on the phone, and always have. And when I saw Sabine for a year, she would ask me, what's going on? Are you okay? And she would just say, any way I can help. There was never any debate about why I shouldn't pick up the canceled appointments. But Winnie seemed aggravated, but was telling me her boss was telling her now she can't, and there's no resources to do it, and I just couldn't understand, and we just kept going in circles about it. And I said, well, you're here. You're already here. You had somebody cancel. I'm just filling in the slot. I don't understand what you're talking about with resources, or I need extra help, I'm having a really hard time. And then she said, well, is it critical though? Are you planning to hurt yourself? Or, well, I said, no, I haven't made a plan, but this got me into a whole discussion I've had before. I just had it with my mom too, and I've had it with other people that are curious about people that ruminate on ending themselves, self-deletion. And I don't think people always plan. I don't think people always make this solid decision. I think some do, and they stick with it. Like, I've told myself I'm going to do something on a certain day before because it eases the pain, it eases tension, things like that. And then the day comes and you can sometimes, well, I've done it every time I've told myself I'm going to do it on a day. I end up saying, okay, the day comes, I can wait till tomorrow, because it just kind of keeps you going. But what I think happens a lot of times is there are people that are like me that go into these ideations when we're going through bad spirals or depressions, or things trigger us. And I think sometimes it just takes one too many triggers. It just takes, I think sometimes there is just one too many things going on, and that's enough to stress a person out enough that has this issue, and they say, I'm done. And it's spur of the moment, and they do it. And I was telling her, I said, I think that can happen. I think I'm one of these type of people. You give me one too many triggers. I said, so what I try to do is I pick up an earlier appointment. I'm trying to help myself. I could just give up and not do that, but I try to get the extra help if it's available. And I said, I never have been told that I could not do that. And what you're saying to me don't make any sense, and it's contradictive. But she didn't try to go into anything helpful in the session. We just kept going in circles with this. And I said, this is a waste of time. I said, I feel stupid now for even coming here. I said, why am I even here? I said, we just keep talking about this single issue. So anyway, it was horrible. I didn't expect it. I was totally blindsided by it. And up at the front desk, I told the ladies up there, and they were confused. They said, well, the only time we really see that as an issue is if we get somebody that's wanting to come in multiple times a week. They're wanting to come in 2 or 3 times in 1 week, and I've never done that, except my psychologist, Sabine, scheduled me back to back in the last week I saw her. I didn't ask her. She told me she was going to do it, and I was really close to her. I feel like we had a really good closeness, and she wanted to do that, and I wanted that. So I remember she laughed about it because she said people will probably turn their heads and I'm going to schedule you back to back. But we just laughed, and she was leaving, and that was the last time I was going to see her. But besides that, I've never picked up appointments like that in the same week. And in fact, I've been offered it before in the text, and I don't. I'll at least wait a week out. So I told them up there, and they said that shouldn't be an issue, and you're needing help. She's here, that's true. She just had someone cancel. You're picking it up. So I left there with nothing accomplished from that, and I ended up calling and talking to the main people on the phone about it. That puts you down for scheduling. And the lady that I talked to also was really confused, and she said what I said to Winnie in the session. She said, that don't make any sense. She's there. She's already at work. You're just picking up a canceled spot. So honestly, what I think happened was that she wasn't paying attention to her schedule, wasn't checking it, that somebody else had filled in a spot, which would be irresponsible. And I don't know for sure. This is what I think happened. And since I was her last hour for that day, last slot, she probably thought she was going to have that cancellation since she didn't check it, and maybe she was going to leave early. That's all I can figure, because she seemed irritated. It really seemed immature. I was really shocked by it. I was like, wow, I'm just shocked by this. It's not how to treat a patient, especially going through ideations and dark depressive spirals. So I'm just frustrated because now I have another request in. That was so embarrassing. Now it's going to be too awkward to see her, I feel like, and the way she treated me. So I'm changing again. After Sabine, I had went to Julie. Julie just seemed so disconnected and uninterested. So I changed, went to Winnie. It started out pretty decent with Winnie. And then this happened. So now I'm going to try it one more time here and see if they can get me somebody else. If it don't work out again, I will probably just stop therapy at that place and see what else I can find. So it's been tough because I don't have many outlets. Sometimes I call Trans Lifeline, and that can be helpful. But to give you an idea of some of this darkness I was going through, this last spiral had been the darkest I had been in a while. And what happened was it got dark enough that I wanted to dissociate. And I used to have a real issue with wanting to dissociate with adult content. And that's something I've largely got away from. Go back 2019 and before, I would say I had an addiction to that. Many people do, especially a lot of men. There's a lot of addiction to adult content, but men and women can get totally addicted to it. So what happened was I have not looked at anything like that in a really long time, like hard content. Soft stuff, yeah, models, social media models, things here and there, but nothing hard. And am I telling you it's inherently wrong? No, I just know for myself it's pulled me down into a negative. It could pull me down into, it's kind of like a vortex. You get sucked into it, and time, you just lose sense of time. And for me, it just takes you out of facing whatever is causing the depression. It just distracts from the dysphoria, things like that. So what happens, I started looking at adult content, but what's interesting, as much as I did, I still did not break. I've been on a 5-month semen retention streak of no touching, like no messing around with myself at all. That's something I have never accomplished. 5 months of where there's been no touch involved in it. And even in this spiral, in this dark spiral, I was sucked into it to where I was watching things and absorbing things, but I was aroused in a dissociative way, but I didn't let myself do that. And you might ask yourself, well, why not? Because I've discussed on this channel before how it also helps me to retain. It's helped me to retain by, I really feel like if I didn't, and I was in one of those spirals and just let loose, when I've done that in the past and lose a long streak and let that happen, it's much worse. I know from my experience of this, for me, I've noticed anytime that's ever happened, it's much worse. Vibration goes into the toilet. It's like everything is harder, even harder to climb out of for me. So not only did I start going into this content, but I was also ruminating and having ideations of unaliving. So what happens then is I go into a dark place of thinking on people that have done that. And I've spoken of this before too, but with adult content, it'll make me go in and look at adult performer women that are no longer with us. and it's very dark. It's not that I'm disrespecting them, though. It's like I have this, I'm aroused by them, but I'm also attached to their energy. The energy, I can relate to their energy, relate to depression, relate to whatever darkness they might have been going through in a lot of ways. I can relate to the darkness. And I can just, it's like a camaraderie feeling. And at the same time, I can be attracted to them, but I'm also attracted into the dark energy in general that I can relate to them on. And this is something that I can tell you now about because I had trouble back in the day telling my psychologist, Sabine, about it. But it was good we did talk about it. It was something I thought, gosh, I tell her this. I mean, she's just gonna, what's she gonna think? Will she even want to still see me? You know, because I felt like it's just real morbid. But at the same time, I'm sure I'm probably not the only one that's had things like this happen or think this way. When you ruminate on not wanting to be here, your mind, I think, you gravitate to people that you can easily, if you let yourself, you can gravitate to people that are also, it can be dangerous because in life, people that are alive, you could gravitate to people that are in a miserable place. Misery loves company. I mean, you could gravitate to people that are drinking all the time, or they're dissociating with things that are detrimental all the time, and then you get pulled into it, hanging out with them and stuff. I haven't done nothing like that, and I am happy about that, but I'll still look at things and ruminate. And it's not just with the adult content. I spoke in the last video about Stevie Ryan too. I say she's kind of a B actress, or an actress people didn't know much about, and she self-deleted. And I've ruminated on her before. I've ruminated on other people I know that I've seen that have left this world. I'm fascinated with the energy. It's like I want to also feel and know what drove them, because it's also trying to find answers for myself a lot of times. What's driving me and why, how am I hanging in there? So I was going through that again, and it took me like 3 days to pull out of that. And I finally cleared my energy, and I clear my energy by meditating and connecting to source, and I just disconnect from everything I was doing, and you just clear it out. The way I do it is I just ask, everyone has different belief systems. I've spoken mine before, that I believe in reincarnation. I believe in a source energy, and I connect to that, and I bring that in to my soul and my aura and my energy centers, and clear everything out, and just spend time talking with myself about it and connecting with source about it and working through it. And that way I can have a clean slate to try to work from, because I feel like if you don't do that, the reason why I do that is because when you go into dissociation, especially with something like adult content, my experience is you connect to the energy of all these people, whether they're deceased or not. You connect to their residual energy from the pictures, the videos, and you connect with, if you meditate long enough and you work in the spiritual realm long enough and get into this type of stuff long enough, I feel like you develop a psychic awareness, and you can understand that you're connecting with all these people's energies. So think of it like a tar of all these things getting on your psyche and on your body at one time, on your soul, and cluttering. It's like clutter in your home, like dirt and dust, and it's clutter of the soul, clutter of the aura. And a lot of people are walking around like that all the time with constant clutter. And for me, what I've noticed, if I clear it, then my thinking can come back. If I don't clear it, I could stay dissociated for days, or I could just not think straight, and I won't make any decisions or any solid decisions on anything. So I pulled out of it, and I'm okay right now. I've kind of had a couple of days of mid-depression, but nothing like that. And like I say, I'm trying to get another therapist. Gender dysphoria is always something that is still an ongoing thing. And I struggle. I've talked to my mom. Me and my mother actually had a very long conversation the other day. And there's times where my mom, I feel like she's more coherent than others, or more receptive than others. And other times I don't feel like she's that coherent to take in a lot of information, especially on a very deep level, like talking about gender dysphoria and depression and spirituality, or a lot of the things that I deal with or go through. But this particular day, a few days ago, she was coherent and curious, and we talked about it more. And I just told her, I said, Mom, it comes from so many things. It comes from childhood. It comes from upbringing. It comes from probably ancestral trauma. We talked extensively about my thoughts on my past life that I saw in regression. She was very curious about that. Her thing was, on the past life trauma, she feels like, well, it sounds like the past life woman that you were is trying to take you over. She had a legitimate point, but I told her, I said, well, that crossed my mind. I've sat and talked to that part of me before, and I've tried to integrate it, and I've tried to comfort it. And I believe she was traumatized. I believe she was abused in that life. I believe she might have been in the adult industry. And I think that's another reason I'm drawn to the women I am, the way I am, the darkness and things in the industry. I think I was somebody that lived it, or lived a tragic life that didn't end well. May have even deleted in that life on my own. And I have thought before, that part of me wants to still live and wants to take over this lifetime. But the way that I feel is that, as much as I've tried to work with that part of me, I've been listening to an audiobook called No Bad Parts. It's written by a psychologist about working with your inner parts of you. Parts that can cause you shame and guilt, and the parts of you that it's very complex. But if you're into this sort of thing, I would listen. I'm listening to the audiobook on Spotify called No Bad Parts, but it's complex about the idea is that we all have these multiple parts inside of us, protector parts, and we have parts of us that come in when different things trigger us. And most of these parts likely come from trauma and come from childhood, or I believe also can come from past life. If you've had past life regression like I have, and you can remember pieces of a past life. And with her, you learn in No Bad Parts how to separate from the part. And you kind of, the idea is in the book is that you ask the part to stand aside. Well, you stand aside and you meditate, or you can say, you can envision the part waiting, like in a waiting room, separate it from yourself, from your inner core, from your soul, from everything else. And then you can kind of get an idea of how you really feel. Well, when I separate her, I still feel feminine, like still feel, the only difference is I don't feel all the debauchery. She has a lot of, I think that's a lot of where also I get attracted to the adult content, and a lot of the debaucherous thoughts I get. And I'm not saying all that's inherently bad. I'm just saying when I dissociate with that kind of stuff, I believe a lot of it comes from the life she led. But when I separate her and I just feel with Source, I feel very feminine. I still feel very feminine at my core, but it's just more of a pure energy. And that tells me, well, I feel that more than anything. I feel that more than the masculinity. We all have masculine and feminine, but I'm just saying the feminine outweighs the masculine by quite a bit when I do this exercise. And I've done this exercise quite a few times. So I was telling my mom, I said, yeah, but when I separate her, it just takes out all the tragic stuff she was going through, but I still feel at a pure level more feminine than anything. So that's interesting because I've discussed in I think a couple of videos back when I was talking about this book, there's another part of me, the masculine part of me, that the fake masculine character I used to be, which is a lot different than what you see here and how I am here. I don't have any videos. Well, yeah, I do. I mean, I do have a couple of shorts that show me more masculine, but generally I was a lot more aggressive. I had short hair most of the time, spiked, usually kind of a slick look. I usually kept a goatee and mustache, and that's all good, fine and good, but my whole attitude was mostly a created facade. I'm not going to say 100%. There were pieces of me that are true in there, but most of it was a created facade because I had been bullied so much in childhood, and my childhood was unstable in so many ways, and I've spoke about before how I didn't have a real stable father figure. My biological dad was gone before I was born. I've spoke about I was kidnapped as a baby from one of my aunts. I was an alcoholic at one point. My mom got me back, but that happened. First stepfather was an alcoholic who beat my mother. Was super abusive. I can remember one incident of her and him and her wielding a knife. And I was grabbing her leg, hollering. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. But there were other incidents, and the trauma is still there, whether you can remember these incidents or not. It gets stored in your cells, it gets stored in your body, and you develop things from that. Anxiety, depressive things, all kinds of different things can develop in early childhood from you being involved in certain incidents. My second stepfather was largely vacant, and then at 12 years old, my third stepfather, he was immature. He had been a drug dealer when he got with my mother. My mother had been an alcoholic at the time. I've spoke about a lot of this before too. It's just all kinds of chaos. There were points of stability in my childhood, but a lot of points of instability and no clear father figure. And I think that's another thing that contributes to my gender dysphoria as well. It's no clear father figure. But anyway, with being bullied so much as well throughout childhood and into my young adulthood too, I dealt with bullying at certain levels. At jobs, throughout my life at jobs. That was another reason about my mid-20s, going into my early 30s, this character developed. And he also became a gym bro, and at one point became very muscular and became a bodybuilder and did all kinds of stuff. And none of that's bad either, but it just depends on the reasons why you're doing stuff. So I was doing all these things to create a superficial facade as a protector, but it also caused me a lot of trouble because I wasn't being myself and I wasn't being authentic, and my life was still unstable. Sometimes it was the same thing. Sometimes it was stable, sometimes it wasn't. I was still having no real complete stability in my life, and many times through my through earlier adult years, I almost passed away from whether it was binge drinking or drinking and driving, or the time I was in the hospital for all the over-the-counter drugs I was doing and not eating, eating disorder, all kinds of stuff. Another woman I'm fascinated with, one of my favorite musicians, Amy Winehouse. I could have passed just like her in my life too. She passed from not eating and drinking too much. I've done that, and I've had a few instances where I was just blacked out, and I'd say a couple of times people were around to turn me over or be there to watch me. There's been a couple of times, probably, well, at least once I remember I was left, well, a couple of times I was left alone, blacked out, and I just, guess you can say I was lucky. I woke up. A lot of people never wake up. That's what happened to Amy Winehouse, because it depends on what your body can take and how many nutrients you got in your body, and how are you healthy. And if you're not healthy, the least healthy you are, or the less healthy you are, the more chances you are going to pass from something like that. And in the time I was in the hospital in 2010 from the over-the-counter drugs and not eating, I was in a coma for a day. Just very fortunate I recovered, and it was pretty hard recovery on my body. It was rough on my body, but I eventually got through it without any permanent damage except for trauma. I had quite a bit of trauma added on to all the other trauma. But getting back to no bad parts, what I've been doing too is separating this bully from me. And it's different than when I separate the past life woman I was. It's because when I separate the bully, see what happens, I'm talking about this now too, because when I told myself a few weeks ago or a month ago I was going to transition, I made a decision. I had a real issue with this bully, my old self coming in. And it is kind of funny, I laugh about it because I've literally envisioned my old self with the spiked hair and everything walking up and being like I was, bullying myself and saying, you calling me names, of course calling me a sissy and everything else. And I'm like, okay, right on, but I find it amusing. So I'm definitely gonna find it amusing when somebody else does it. But I have to laugh about it. You have to have some humor about some of this stuff because you drive you nuts. So anyway, I fight back with it, and I was like, okay, we want to go back to living the life we was, where we wasn't authentic. And finally, what happened, the more I talking with this part, there became a little more reasoning. I will say that, to where it's like, okay, the part calms down because it realizes, you start giving it some rationale, like, well, look, we wasn't happy when we were this fake facade. We had thoughts that we had, feminine thoughts that we repressed, or we would call ourselves names when we had these feminine thoughts, or we were attracted to a guy or something and we had these thoughts and we repressed them and said it was a demon, or we would call ourselves names, and because we're too masculine for that, that's not me. And it was me. So we start rationalizing it, and the bully part of me is like, well, you can't protect yourself. If you're a woman, you're going to get hurt. So we start having these discussions, and this is why this was happening too. There's this backlash, like, well, you're going to get hurt. I'm there to protect. That's why you created me, basically. And I know it sounds so crazy. You're talking with yourself, but if you listen to the book, it actually, to me, makes a lot of sense to communicate with these parts in this way. It's like meditating on the different aspects of yourself. And finally, it started to calm down. It's still something that's troublesome, but it's calmed down a little bit to where I'm like, look, I can take care of myself, because we're faced with either living inauthentic. I said, anytime I try to even think about I try to think of just living as a guy. I've thought, that's why I was telling my mom, she kept saying that I don't believe in a biblical God or anything like that, but she does. And she says, well, I pray that you were born a boy and there's a reason. Don't you think you were born a boy for a reason, though? And she was asking me that too. Why were you born a boy and not a girl? Because wouldn't it have been easier if you were born a girl again? Because I also think I've had more past lives as a woman in general than I've had as a guy. And I think that's another reason why I'm having so much dysphoria now. I think that I've been a woman more times than not. And my soul, on one of these rare instances, this time decided to be a guy. And I told her, I said, well, yeah, I think the reason is, Mom, because the life I've led, if I would have been a girl in this life, the way this life has went, the way it was planned out, some of the people I grew up around and some of the boys I grew up around, some of the men we were around, and some of the unstable situations we were around, I think I would have ended up with a lot more trauma. I've probably been physically abused on a level that would have been horrific. And I don't know how much, but I think it would have happened. And I think the soul knew, and the soul's like, we're going to go into this. Because the idea with reincarnation, I know some of you may believe in it, some of you may not, but my belief in this is we're evolving, or the idea is for us to work out traumas from past lives, even though usually we don't remember them unless we have past life regression. But the idea is to learn new things in new lifetimes and also evolve through them. And that means you're not supposed to come into a lifetime remembering every past life. Or even if you have past life regression, you're only going to remember pieces here and there that your soul feels like you can handle. Because if you come in from birth remembering your past lives and completion, it defeats the purpose of a new experience in the lifetime you're being born into. It also can just overwhelm your mind. If you as a child knew about all this trauma you went through in past life, you would just be completely overwhelmed by all the past lives you've led. So it'd be very problematic. So I was telling her what I think now is that I just think my soul chose a guy this life to try to make it a little easier and try to work through some of that past life trauma I had. And maybe some other past lives I'm just not seeing. But I just told her, I said, regardless of that, though, I think I've been a woman more times than not. And that's also why when I separate her from me, at my core, I still, when I'm connected to Source, I just feel very feminine. I said, it's like there's not much masculinity there. There's some, but it's light. And my femininity is much stronger. And I said, I think that's the reason, because it's more at my core from the various lives I've led. So we discussed that for a while. And I told her, I said, but when I separate the bully from me, I don't feel masculine at the core. See, that's the thing. When I separate him and he sits in a waiting room or he's off to the side and I'm separated from him, still connected to Source, I still feel very feminine at the core. I don't feel him. I don't feel that aggression. I don't feel who I was as him. I remember it, but I don't feel it. So that's what I was trying to get across to her, but I know she really just hopes I can integrate it. And I just told her, I said, Mom, I've tried, but I've tried so many times. And I said, it's like I've gone to therapy for a year and a half. And then I had to explain to her in depth too. I said, you understand, don't you, that my psychologist, Sabine, she never said I was trans, but she had me on a path toward transition. I mean, I was really close to doing hormones. It's just that they were taken off the board there used to be I could get them you would be able to get them at my clinic for almost no cost. But when Trump came into office and they decided to start pulling federal funding, if a lot of these clinics were still doing that, they couldn't do it anymore. They couldn't take on new patients under that program. And I told her, I said I was going to do it last year before my 50th birthday. I talked to her about it and she smiled and she said okay, because she knew, because it'd been talked about a long time. So I told her, I said, Mom, I said, Sabine, you know, when I'd come into the office and comment on one of her dresses that she was wearing that was pretty, she would always look at me and say, it's $10 on Amazon, you know, saying I should get one. She gave me makeup before I left, you know, a makeup bag and makeup, and she was excited to see me open it and look at it and stuff before that was the last time I saw her. So I was trying to tell my mom, I said, you know, she diagnosed me gender dysphoric after I talked to her for a little bit. She didn't she wasn't thinking I needed to. I said from the first time she met me, she asked me if I wanted to talk for a little while before hormones. She didn't immediately, I don't think, saw me. She didn't know. But after a while, I really do think she saw me as a trans woman. And she just never said that outright. And speaking of Sabine, I miss her a lot because of what I'm going through now. It just shows me that it can be hard. I've heard of people talking about before, it's hard to find therapists or psychologists that you connect with, and now I see that because with her I just got lucky, really, because now it's a struggle so to find one that connects to you in that way, it's amazing. And with this stuff happening, I just realized, wow, I miss her a lot. But hopefully I'll find another one that'll be good. I hate that I missed a group that Sabine tried to set me up with as well, and I wasn't able to go to that group. It was trans people and gender dysphoric people. I think that's all that was going to be in that group, and my car was running bad, but it was mainly that adult store I worked at. I knew the boss would give me grief to try to get off 8 Fridays in a row. And it would have been a battle to try to have gotten that. But I hate it because there are no groups in Tennessee. And that is something Winnie did that was good for me. She tried to look up groups. The one group that was happening is not happening right now. And that's at the Knoxville Pride Center, where they've had them forever, and now they're off the schedule. They would have a trans non-binary group every other week, and they're off the schedule. So another group I looked up a county over didn't have enough people attending, they said, so they couldn't do that one. And there's no other ones. And I guess I would say to that is, in red states it's harder. I really do believe that. Red states don't want to give much help with it anyway, unless the federal government's telling them to. And it's not like all of us can just up and move places. So I'm just trying to work with it the best way I can. So yeah, there's been the therapy issue. There's been not being able to find groups to connect with. And then I've been working through the depressive spirals, and then I've been working through the parts inside of me. And I was telling my mom, I said, Mom, I am still working with it, but I said, anytime I try to tell myself, can you just be a guy? And I'm not talking about the old guy I was. I said, just being a guy. I said, it's kind of like, I'm just like, I guess. That's what I'm telling myself. Maybe I can. I said, that's what seems to happen. But I also realize the challenges at 50 years old to be a trans woman. And there's always a chance estrogen could give me some health complication or whatever. I know these things, but at the same time, I was telling my mom, I said, it's like this also causes me ideations of not wanting to be here, the dysphoria. So that's a very serious thing too. It contributes because it's not resolved. So sometimes I tell myself it's better to take the risk of taking estrogen if you can, and maybe it's better, don't worry so much about your safety. Yeah, worry about it, but at the same time, if it's going to let you live happier in general, what are you supposed to do? That's what I was telling her too. I said, what are you supposed to do? And she didn't ever tell me not to do it. I can just tell that, of course, she'd rather hopes that I can come to terms with not, but she'll accept me either way. Now, the other thing, of course, that probably doesn't help me is finances and just the society we live in, the system we live in, where to live, to have your basic needs and to just have a roof over your head and have basic food, you have to work in this system. And I know there's many out there that are, even if they're completely miserable, I've known men that are absolutely, I'm sure women too, but my experience is mainly with men that act this way, is even if they're completely miserable, it's ingrained in their mind, work is everything, or work is what makes them men, or work is what makes them valuable. But what I'm saying is that's another point of my misery, is the way this society is set up to where, most people are out there doing things they don't want to be doing. They're commuting to places they don't want to commute to. They're out there in traffic they don't want to be in, or they're on bus rides they don't want to be on, subways they don't want to be on, to go to some place, some job, whatever it may be, that if they had the choice, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. But society pressures us and conditions us to believe, well, the cliche is what you hear a lot. This is the way it is. This is what we all do. And this is what you got to do, or you're not valuable to society. It's basically what you're made to feel, or you're made to feel a complete piece of crap. You're made to feel a complete piece of garbage, whatever. And I just don't agree with any of that. But at the same time, I know this is how society is, but it is a point of my misery too. And I wish I could make money at home or online. Maybe one day I can. But I've spoke about on this channel before, been abused at jobs on so many occasions, harassed at jobs, bullied at jobs, seen so much corruption at jobs, various jobs. I've worked all kinds of jobs, seen just about every place I've worked at, there's been some sort of fakery, some sort of corruption, staff sleeping with staff, managers doing stuff with staff, sleeping with staff, whatever, you name it, you know it. A lot of you live it or dealt with it. Some people totally agree with it and say, well, like I said, that's just the way it is. But I'm just saying to you that, to all of you all, that's another point of my misery. And I'm not alone in this. People can act like I'm alone in this. There's plenty of people on YouTube here to talk about it too. Some people's channels are built around that subject. One that comes to the top of my head, a more recent channel, is Life Outrage. If you are into that sort of thing, about stuff that we are pretty much kind of forced to do in society, or the way it's set up. But there's a lot of channels that talk about this sort of stuff and how we should try to evolve into some better system for everybody. And I'm not pretending I have all the answers to that. I'm just saying there's got to be something better. So Anyway, what that leads me to say is I'm probably going to file bankruptcy. And that was another trigger for me, actually. That was another trigger for me a week ago. It probably helped send me into that spiral. But finally, I was like, what does it matter? I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Credit can be good. It can be like a lot of things. It can be positive. It can be negative. If you're in a really good place financially, you're doing what you want to do. You're living how you want to live. You have finances that are coming from what you enjoy, and you have the credit. Credit can be beneficial. But if you're like me, you deal with depression and you deal with gender dysphoria, or you're dealing with other mental illness, or you're dealing with other things that plague you in your life, or you have ideations like I have, and you're trying to just live, you're trying to live, and you have credit, but you fell back on it. And I haven't bought frivolous things. I haven't went out. Hell, God, I need clothes. I need a lot of things, but I've bought little things here and there, but mostly I'd fall back on my credit for food, just to pay things, just to live off of. But it's just gotten to a point where now I realize the situation I'm in, it's become detrimental. And it comes down to, well, keeping your bills caught up, your rent caught up, or you're going to keep barely paying the minimum on your credit cards, or minimum on what you got there in credit, just to be ate up with interest. And we know interest rates are that's another thing. And you'll have some people agree with that too. There's some people that agree with everything in this country. They agree with us having no health care. They agree with all the homeless people on the dang street. They agree with all of it. They agree with worshiping the corporations. They agree with tiny amount of people having most of the wealth in the world. You name it. But I'm just saying that I don't agree with all of that. I mean, a lot of it's crazy. But without getting too far in the weeds, I'm just saying that if you're falling back on credit when you're having issues and you're just trying to eat and survive, and it gets to a point where you just need to keep up with your regular bills and keep your necessities and things like that, it's better to let it go. Because if you don't, then you could if you're in a position like this, and I know others have been, people default on their credit all the time. So I know I'm not alone on that either. But if you're jeopardizing your home and jeopardizing being able to take care of yourself and have your basic stuff and stuff you got to have, then you better let that go. And I'm looking into assistance for low income or no income to help me with that. But it did trigger me. I guess that's what I'm saying. That's why I was talking about triggers, about when you have ideation on self-deletion, things like that. And that's what I was meaning. Take a trigger like that with the other things I deal with. If you added one or two more other bad triggers on top of that, that might be enough for me to say I'm done. I'm not saying it is, but I'm just saying that's kind of how my mind works. And I think a lot of people that end up leaving this world, that's what happens. It's not always neatly planned out. It's just one too many things, and they're done. That's what happened to Stevie Ryan, the woman I talked about, the actress, the YouTuber. Not a lot of people know who she is. You can always look her up, but Stevie had one too many triggers. I don't think she planned it. She had lifelong depression. She had some bad relationships. Her last relationship was unfortunately with her therapist. I think he was a nurse practitioner, but he was her therapist, I do believe, and they started seeing each other. And I'm not saying she made a decision to do that too, but she had a lot of issues, and he's a therapist. He knows not to do that, but they broke up. It was a bad breakup. Apparently he said a lot of bad things about her on social media to make it worse, a lot of slander and hurtful things. And then that was a bad trigger, and then her grandfather died. not like kind of right behind all that. And she was super close to him. And what if he had not passed right then? So, it's like stacking things, and then that's it. And she had it, she couldn't deal with it. So, anyway, we'll see what happens with my new therapy, and hopefully I get a new one and it goes well. And I'm just going to keep trying to move forward as best I can. And at the end of this month, I should know something about Point of Pride, that I applied for a grant for facial hair and neck hair removal. So, see if I get that. And I guess I'll talk to you guys later on. Bye.